Hi guys, it's Dr. Denney over at Four Paws at Fulshear Veterinary Clinic, and today Maddie and I are going to be discussing dog emergencies and what constitutes an emergency and what should you do if one arises.
Dr. Denney, what should I do if my dog is having an emergency?
So the first thing you should do if it's during business hours is you can go ahead and give us a call. Our number is listed on our website, 281-801-1444. If it's outside of business hours, then you can contact the nearest veterinary emergency clinic. We often send a lot of patients over to the veterinary emergency group over in Katy. I think their phone number is 281-888-8713. And that's who you would call if we are closed. And there are also All Pets Animal ER. There's Blue Pearl Katy that you can also reach out to. I believe those are going to be the three that are going to be the nearest.
What is considered a dog emergency?
So I think that's a really great question. So let's go ahead and kind of put us in like the human frame of mind. So if you have like a migraine headache, that's probably not going to constitute like an emergency. You'd probably go to an urgent care. If you crack your head open and you fall and something is bleeding, or you lose consciousness, then that's going to be an emergency. Other types of emergencies, if your dog gets bit by a snake, stung by a wasp, a bee, any kind of sudden swelling, profuse vomiting that's happening more than one time in a 24-hour period, diarrhea that's happening more than once in a 24-hour period, because our pets can dehydrate relatively rapidly. Other examples of emergencies: hit by car, coughing when you know your dog has a heart condition. If you look at your dog is super lethargic and you look at their gums and their gums are white when they're supposed to be nice and pink, these are things that, there's something seriously wrong. I would say when I worked a bunch of emergency before I opened this practice, we would occasionally have people coming in for ear infections. Their dog would have like really severe ear infections. And while their dog was very uncomfortable, and yes, it did need to be addressed, it was not life-threatening. So they would often have longer wait times because we would have to see the more pressing and urgent cases first before we would get to the ear infection. So something to be aware of, that if you do go to the emergency clinic, if your dog is stable, and they will triage and make sure, but if you are stable, then you have to wait for the more pressing or the more urgent cases to be seen first, much like a human ER.
Is it best to call an emergency hospital first before coming in?
So I always think that calling when something is happening or when you're on the way is always better than just showing up. Giving the clinic a heads up so we can have an idea on what kind of things we might need. If there's an allergic reaction, if we have a puppy that's vomiting and suddenly limp, we might think of like anaphylaxis. So we're going to know to have some oxygen and maybe some glucose water ready to go on their gums. So it gives us a heads up on what are we going to need so we can respond to this emergency as best as possible. Much like when you dial 911, your operator, when they send your report to whatever emergency facilitator is going to coming out to you, like either an ambulance or police, etc., they're being briefed on the situation so they can be better prepared to handle it once they arrive. So the same principle is going to apply here. We really do want you to call, even if you're in the car on your way, just call, give a heads up on what's going on so we can make sure that we're prepared to give your pet the best care as quickly as possible.
Should I give my dog first aid at home, and what should you have in your first aid kit?
So it's going to depend on kind of where you're at and what's happened. If your dog has just been hit by a car, first aid is going to need to happen at the veterinary clinic. Like, you need to just take your dog and cat and go. If you are out and you are not near a veterinary clinic and there is a large gash and it's gushing blood, having some bandaging material to help staunch or stop the bleeding and placing a temporary bandage so you have time to transport the pet somewhere will be necessary. I would say, there are classes that teach you how to do CPR in pets. Unfortunately, what I will let you know is the success rate on CPR, even when you're in a medical facility, it's 10% or less is what you're going to be able to save. But like I said, if a pet passes out, these are things that you need to get them to the nearest hospital. But I think bandaging is okay. I think that if you think your dog is overheated, coming in and putting them in a pool or spritzing them down with cool water, before you put them in the car to get to a veterinarian, that's certainly certain types of first aid that we can reach for.
Why is prompt treatment in an emergency situation so important to my dog's health?
Because early intervention sometimes means the difference between an alive pet and a pet that's deceased. Like heat stroke patients. If we get to a dog or cat in time, we can save them. Even delaying 30 to 20 minutes can mean the life between life or death for a pet. So delaying care is not only going to make the prognosis for your specific pet worse, but it's also going to increase the chances that, we're not going to be able to fix it, and it may be more expensive to treat. So it's always better to, at the first sign of an emergency or that something's not right, to contact your veterinarian. You can feel free to call us at Four Paws. I have a bunch of years of critical training and working at the emergency clinic, so we handle a lot of emergencies here, so you can feel free to give our clinic a call.